Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Family Tech Talk Night. We will get started in just a minute. If you will take a look at the chat is actually available to you tonight. We are going to post a link for you to sign in and let us know that you were here tonight. So in the chat, in a minute, you should see a link for you to sign in and let us know you're here tonight. So I think if Kimberly, you could post that to the group. Fantastic. Please sign in and let us know you are here tonight. And while we have you, please also let us know in the chat, where are you dialing in from? My name is Lynette Owens. I will be your host tonight, and I'm dialing in from the Boston, Massachusetts area. So welcome from the East Coast. So again, if you're just joining us, please sign in the link that you see in the chat and let us know in the chat, where are you dialing in from? Again, this is Lynette Owens if you're just joining, and I am going to be your host tonight. I'm dialing in from Boston, Massachusetts. Please tell us in the chat where you're dialing in from. If you would like to listen to tonight's session in Spanish, please select the globe icon and pick Spanish as your audio channel, and you will be greeted by my colleague Gigi. She will be our interpreter for those of you who'd like to listen in Spanish this evening. Welcome we've got California represented here, Colorado, welcome. Wisconsin, fantastic, welcome. Illinois, all right. We're moving a little further east now. I might be the furthest east, but that's okay. So, all right, let's get started. So we know we'll have people probably joining still over the next few minutes. So forgive me if I'm repetitive here, but again, welcome everyone to the Family Tech Talk Night. I'm your host, Lynette Owens. And a couple of things before we get started. I want to welcome everyone from, I think we should have many of these areas of the country represented tonight. Don't be shy. Tell us in the chat where you're dialing in from. And also, we'll post it again. There's a sign-in link. If you could please sign into that link to let us know you were here tonight, that'd be great. You can listen to tonight's session in English or in Spanish by selecting the globe icon on your screen and choosing the Spanish channel. A few other things. This session runs about 75 to 80 minutes. It could go longer depending on your questions. We stay as long as you need us to. And this session is in fact being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be made available to the person at your school that helped to organize tonight's event. Whomever we worked with to get this event scheduled for your school will be the person to receive a copy of the recording tonight. Finally, we want this to be fairly interactive, even though it's virtual. And we do ask that you submit your questions using the Q&A rather than the chat, because we'll be chatting a lot as a group, and your question could definitely get lost in the chat. So please use the Q&A to submit questions in English or in Spanish, because my colleague Gigi, who is our interpreter for Spanish tonight, will help me to understand your questions and respond. And when you leave the event, when you close out of Zoom, you should be presented with a page that is a survey for tonight. So we'll remind you again about this at the end of the session. And we appreciate any feedback that you could give. So before we get started, let me just briefly introduce myself. Again, my name's Lynette Owens. I'm actually the Vice President of Global Consumer Education, as well as the founder of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. Together with our partner PTO Today, we've been bringing the Family Tech Talk Night to communities across the United States for the last 12 years. These were done in person prior to the pandemic, and we've moved them to the virtual format that you are experiencing tonight. And it's another reason why you are here with parents from all across the country rather than just the parents in your local communities. So please do participate, engage, use the chat, use the Q&A, and we should have a really great time tonight. But I do want to get to know you a little bit better. So we have a couple of polls, if you wouldn't mind answering them. And Kimberly, if you wouldn't mind launching this, there'll be a poll that you'll see. The first question is, how old is your oldest child? Are they 5 years old or younger, 6 to 10, 11 to 14, or 15 or older? How old is your oldest child? Okay, this looks great. Seems like we have one age category dominating the rest, but we have some of you from every one of the categories. So I'm just going to end the poll here. And if you could share those results. So it looks like most of you have them in the 6 to 10 years age range. That's fantastic. Your kids are still looking up to you at that age. And then, you know, the next biggest groups are tied at the 11 to 14 or 15 or older age groups. That's great. We actually have content that's applicable to kids of all ages. And we will be talking about things that apply to all ages and some that might mean more to some than others. But this gives me a good sense of where I might need to spend just a little bit more time. So the second question for you is, what are you most interested in discussing? So Kimberly, if you could launch that second poll. The options are managing screen time for my kids, helping my kids stick to age-appropriate content, dealing with online bullying or hate, getting ideas for positive uses of the internet, or not sure, just here to learn something new. So which of these topics are you most interested in discussing? And unfortunately, we don't have all of the above or, you know, choose multiple options. Again, we're just trying to get a sense of where you are tonight in terms of your concerns. Okay, wow. Let's end the poll here and share the results. This is a lot more even than I've ever seen in the past, and we've been doing this format for over 2 years now. So it looks like there's interest in all of these areas. So tonight we are going to be touching on all of these areas. But because that's such a wide range of topics, we won't go super deep into any one. And I'll explain a minute about our approach, but there is the Q&A for you to also, you know, make us aware that there's something in particular you're interested in hearing about. So, okay, great. So let's move on. And I just want to open up with a little bit about our approach, which I kind of alluded to already. We've been doing this work in communities, directly with parents, directly with students in many countries around the world for several years now. Actually, we launched our program in 2008. So it's actually been over 14 years of doing this work. And one of the things that we've learned over that time is that just trying to scare people is not productive. It doesn't mean that we don't want you to know the truth. It doesn't mean that we're going to sugarcoat anything. We absolutely believe you should know the facts. But at the same time, we want you to go in with any decisions you or your children make with your eyes wide open. So we prefer to see ourselves as educating and empowering And to be honest with you, we learn as much along the way in these community events as we do share what we know. So that is why the chat and the questions are very beneficial to not just you asking the question, but really to everybody else who's listening along. So, our approach is to look at this more holistically. And when we talk about digital citizenship, what we mean is that it is important to talk to children about risk, how to identify it and how to avoid it. So definitely safety and security are a big part of that conversation, but it doesn't stop there. It also includes digital literacy. So as an example of the difference between the two, I may understand the importance of protecting my privacy online, but I may not actually know how to do that. So how do I use privacy settings? How do I understand or realize the importance of multi-factor authentication, otherwise known as two-factor authentication or two-step verification? How do I report somebody who is making me feel uncomfortable on a social network, for example? So digital literacy is just as important. And also, as is how we behave. How we behave in the context of rules that govern an online space, whether it's in a gaming platform or a social network or so on. And finally, very often when we talk to children about the use of technology, it can really seem like it's just a long list of what not to do. We're very much a proponent of balancing that conversation with encouraging and modeling ways in which they should be using technology. And so a conversation about, mastering social media, mastering email, mastering texting, mastering whatever it is online for the benefit of the child themselves, for the people around them, or for the world at large, is as important a part of digital citizenship as everything else. So we like to organize our content around these 4 categories. Hopefully you find them easy to remember and pass this on to your children. Tonight, we are going to talk about being online, which is all about setting up the right environment, whether that's the physical or technical environment, setting the rules, and also setting a good example. But while they're online, helping them to be safe, be kind, and be savvy. When we talk about being safe, we will cover issues such as protecting your privacy, protecting your personal information, and even protecting yourself, your physical self. When it comes to kindness, obviously this includes how you treat others, but we feel it's just as important to not only direct kindness and respect towards others, but also to remember to direct that to ourselves as well. And finally, being savvy is not just knowing what the right thing is to do, but actually putting that into practice, encouraging good habits and teaching them good uses. So that's how we like to organize the content for tonight. I will say that while some of this will start off being somewhat technical, it graduates into being a little less so and more around the challenges for us as parents and what we can do or what we need to consider as our children traverse online spaces. So again, if you're just joining us and you'd like to listen in on Spanish, please select the globe icon and pick Spanish as your channel. Also, if you could sign in at the link that my colleague Kimberly just posted in the chat, and Gigi will post there in Spanish in a minute. Please sign in to let us know that you were here tonight. Finally, put all your questions in the Q&A rather than in the chat so that we can keep track of it more easily. And if you have just joined, please tell us in the chat. You'll see in the earlier chats, people were telling us, where are you dialing in from? Again, my name is Lynette Owens. I'm dialing in from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm the mother of one boy and one girl, and I've sent one off to college just this fall, and the other one is in high school now. But I've definitely lived through raising them to be great digital citizens, and I can share my challenges and maybe some of my best practices. But what you're going to hear us talk about tonight is not just from a few people, it's from the collection of parents and experts that we've worked with over the last 14 years of doing this program. So let's start real quickly on setting up the environment. And I won't belabor this part too long. You know, this part was probably more of a challenge at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was home. And so, you know, I'll just say that there's still parts of online safety that do involve our physical health. We often overlook that part and worry more around things like content and how other kids are behaving towards each other or with people they don't really know. But with regard to our physical health, just taking care of the eyes and making sure your kids are taking those breaks. 30, 30, 30 means every 30 minutes, look at something out the window or far away, at least 30 feet away for 30 seconds to rest your eyes. And if you can swing it, investing in blue light blocking glasses, you can get them on Amazon. They don't require a prescription. But we do know that excessive screen time can be very harmful to the eyes. And I think it's really important to teach our children that there are ways that they can prevent some of that damage. One of the other ways that we can teach them is by setting a really good example ourselves. And the same with seating, you know, making sure their feet are flat on the ground when especially as they get older and the demands on using screens for schoolwork become greater. Make sure they're not hunched over an iPad in the corner of you know, a couch or the floor or their bed in a strange position. In working with the Digital Wellness Lab, which is out of Children's Hospital Boston, they did report, the pediatricians did report over the last 2 years, a greater number of seeing a greater number of children complaining of eye strain, neck aches, headaches, back aches, and it was most likely a result of the increased screen time when we were all at home and doing school from home. So just because you might be back to school in person doesn't mean you can't still encourage good physical habits with technology, which it also includes taking breaks, moving around. You know, I think that's probably goes without saying. And another thing around the environment is around the technology. So for those of you, which is probably most of you, using Wi-Fi routers at home, one thing that we really encourage you, especially if you are, there's a few things here to keep in mind, especially if you actually might be working from home now, in addition to letting a lot of other people in your house use that same network. The first is that make sure you've changed the password since you first got the router. A lot of people haven't changed that password since they bought it. So if you haven't done that in a while, please do that. And the second piece of advice is, especially newer routers, they allow you to separate your network, meaning the main network and a guest network. And what we advise is, especially if you've got any devices with sensitive information, whether or not you're working from home, it could just be a desktop or laptop with your tax information or photos you never want to lose. Put that on the main network and then let other things be on the guest network, like maybe the Xbox, the gaming devices, your kids' Kindles. They're certainly, when their friends come over, they should not be on your main network. Let them go on the guest network. And the reason for this is, if for some reason their devices, they accidentally do something, they tap on something that ends up, causing a virus or something to be downloaded on their device, you are separated. It will help to protect the devices that are more sensitive on your home network, especially if you're working from home. So if that's not something you've done before, please consider separating in that way. You know, even smart devices in your house could go on the guest network, right? You know, Wi-Fi extenders, I think, are useful just to make sure that everybody in all parts of the home has a good connection. There isn't a spot that's weaker than others. But again, this was probably more relevant when everybody was home. It's still something worth investing in if you feel that it will help keep peace in the home, or you know, if your child's doing homework over here and you're trying to work over there, everybody's okay. As well as staggering use time, especially if you need to be attending something like this, which is live, and you don't want your connectivity to be slow or stuttering in any way. Have those conversations with the family. Maybe you shouldn't be streaming that movie while you're playing in an online gaming space while I'm trying to be on a Zoom call. You know, that definitely can cause issues potentially in your home. And I will say, with regard to just locking things down, you know, this is important for all of us. We know for sure that cybercrime is reaching fever heights right now. Part of that is because everybody had to shift onto online spaces, but it really has not abated. So make sure, even on your children's devices, especially mobile ones like iPads and phones, that you have security software on there. They may not intentionally mean to tap on something or click on a website, but kids do that. They accidentally go to those places, and you'll be protected if you've got up-to-date security software on those devices, because it's going to block them from going there. Anybody getting crazy text messages these days? Just let me know in the chat. The text is getting insane right now with scams. You know, some of them look legit, and be careful this holiday season, because you're going to get a lot of texts probably that's saying that package you ordered is on the way. Click here to, you know, click here to maybe schedule the delivery. Be careful of those that are pretending to be from UPS or FedEx or Amazon. You know, our company is a security company, and we're definitely seeing a rise in those kinds of malicious kinds of texts. So again, security software can help you protect you and your children from accidentally believing any one of those. Within security software, or even within some of your operating systems, the firewall is important to turn on, because it's kind of like a bouncer watching who's allowed to come in and out in terms of traffic that is okay. And strong passwords is something we'll talk about in a second. A nice exercise that you could practice, especially for those of you with younger children, to get them thinking about what is a strong password and why is it important. Multi-factor authentication, sometimes it's called two-step verification, sometimes it's called two-step authentication. Anyway, this is an important feature you must turn on in every app, every device, any possible place you can have this turned on. Please make sure that's on. That includes your children's Roblox app, as well as Instagram and any other apps they're using. And the reason for this is it's getting much easier for cyber criminals to crack into accounts just using passwords, because most people are not using very good passwords. But in order for them to get in, this two-step is the second lock beyond the password. What it requires is usually a device like a phone or an email account, where after you enter the password, you will be sent a code. Then you have to enter that code. So, you know, if someone figures out your password, but they don't have your phone, then it's going to be difficult for them. You may sometimes get an email saying someone tried to log into that device from this location, and realize that's not you. So that's a signal that probably the password for that account has been compromised. If you ever get an email like that, if your child ever gets a notification like that, immediately go into whatever that account that is and change the password, okay? But that's what multi-factor authentication and using the highest levels of privacy and security settings can help do for you and your children. And finally, if you are not connected in your home network or at work, let's say, you're in the public place like a coffee shop or an airport or wherever, if you're going to use a public Wi-Fi connection, we do encourage you to use a virtual private network to protect your connections, because the data that's coming from you to whatever site you're visiting is encrypted through that. Otherwise, it's not, and any kind of hacker that might be trying to traverse these public Wi-Fi networks will be able to potentially intercept your credit card, let's say, if you were trying to enter that into a shopping site, or a password that your child might be entering into a gaming site. And we can't stress enough, please do the updates whenever they come in your notifications, whether your phone is telling you to update, whether your desktop, whether it's an app on your phone. You know, a lot of these updates are really there to close security holes. So please do those as frequently as you can. With regard to strong passwords, especially for those of you with those younger children, you know, when you get older, you have too many passwords. And we'll talk about what you can do about that in a minute. But at younger ages, teaching children the importance of strong passwords plus how you can actually create one is a great habit. So the first thing is that most cyber criminals can already use any word in the dictionary to try and guess your password. So please don't use any word in the dictionary as part of as your password, because they're going to be able to, you know, automatically just throw every word in the dictionary against one account and be able to crack that. A better idea is to make a password that is a mix of different things and also at least 12 or 13 characters long. And that sounds like an impossible thing to remember, but what might be easier to remember is a sentence. Your kid can make up a fun sentence that they'll remember, but the password is only the first letter of each word in the sentence. Throw in a number, special character, and that's a great password right there. Now, this one isn't quite 13 long, but it's just to give you an example. To remember it, it's might need to buy more toilet paper soon. And they could come up with a silly sentence of their own, and then ask them to change it, you know, in another month or so that they get into that habit. For those of you with older kids, and for those of you as parents, it would probably be easier to use something like a password manager. There are many options out there. Trend has one, Google has one. There's a lot of options out there that are both free and paid. Some of them will just hide your password list for you, so you only have to remember one to unlock that list. Others will actually create really strong passwords that you would never remember, but they're just going to auto-generate them for you, and that's all you need from it to do, so you don't have to remember things. It'll remember it for you. So those are options for those of you who are older, with older children who have too many passwords to remember. And finally, yes, I always forget my passwords too, so that's why a password manager is a really good way to go. So thanks for that comment in the chat. Backing up everything, please do that. You know, set it up for your Apple devices, set it up for your Google devices, set it up. And those are in the cloud. So we also recommend buying the actual the hard drive ones. They're not very big. They just attach to your desktop or your laptop. Lots of space on them, but we actually recommend doing both, because if one of them is compromised, you have the other. Okay, so I know in my house we actually dropped the hard drive one and it broke, so at least we had the cloud backup. Or if you ever feel like the cloud one gets compromised by some big breach or hack, you have it on the hard drive. That's our recommendation on backup. And again, I'm going to be going through a lot of these very fast, so please put your questions in the Q&A and I'll pause at some point to address your questions. Now, some of you in the polling at the beginning told me that you were interested in making sure your kids stuck to age appropriate content. And maybe some of you weren't as interested in this, but these tech tools, these are not even things you have to buy in addition. They already exist. They exist inside the devices that you or your children use, or within the app stores themselves, or within your router. Some of you might have this, or as part of your services you get from your internet service provider. They exist within security software. Some of the big security software companies have these tools. And finally, a lot of them are just in the apps themselves. So we're going to talk about some of those now. First, on the devices, if you could tell me in the chat, how many of you have children using Apple devices? That's a iPad, iPhone, iPod Touch, maybe the iPod Nano. I don't know. Remember those things? How many of you? Okay, great. There's some, sounds like an entire school is using them. Fantastic. Okay. So within the Apple family, you may already be familiar with this, but just very quickly for those who are not, they have a setting called screen time. It's actually the reason why, if you use an iPhone, you get that little reminder on Sunday mornings. Your screen time went up by 2,000% this week. You know those Sunday morning reminders? That is coming from screen time. That is actually Apple's showing you how much it's actually tracking about us. But the same setting allows you to do some kinds of management of your child using it too. So it just takes you setting up an Apple account of theirs underneath your own as part of the family. And then you should be able to select one of your children and decide things like how often can they be online, which apps are they allowed to use, how long are they actually even allowed to use a specific app. It tells you all kinds of things, and you can restrict the kinds of apps they can download from the App Store based on each age rating and so on. So I want to say this about tech tools. Don't let them take the place of you as a parent. What they are really good at is allowing you to put some of those boundaries up. They're also really good at giving you information. But those two things together are what you should use as support for good conversations with your children. You know, in my case, my daughter at one point in her life was getting to bed very late in high school to get her homework done. But we also saw in the screen time that she was spending quite a bit of time on Instagram. So that actually prompted a conversation about, listen, I noticed you're getting to bed a little later, and it's really important to get enough sleep each night. So I also noticed that you've been on Instagram for this long. So what do you think we should do about this? You know, and it really prompts I think a healthier way of approaching, you know, choices that we make and the consequences that come from that. So yes, it's real life data for sure. Gives you to make your case about why you want them to choose a healthier path with the use of the phone. Okay, for those who didn't say you use Apple, how many of you use the Android phones, or the any device that has Android on it? So it could be Samsung, could actually be a Pixel phone. How many of you, tell us in the chat, have children using Android devices? I know you're out there. I mean, I know Apple has many of you, but I know you're out there. Okay, great. So Google actually launched a similar ability for their devices called Google Family Link. And, you know, this used to be only in an app form. You'd have to download this app and it would enable you to do everything I just described with Apple. You would be able to connect their device to this and know how to restrict the kinds of apps they could download, the amount of time, and so on. Just this year, they actually launched a browser version. So you don't actually have to be on the app. You can actually launch a browser and do all of the same things. So check that out if you were not already familiar with Google Family Link. Both of these things I've just talked about are free, as are everything else I'm going to talk about. For those of you, and I know there's a lot of you who have kids watching YouTube, they actually launched last year something called the supervised account. This now allows you to, have a little bit more flexibility than the YouTube Kids app did. The YouTube Kids app is really good for very, very young children, the ones that like to still watch Elmo. But once they hit about age 8, 9, it's not as useful. So they're actually doing, they're offering you 3 different settings for kids depending on their age and depending on your feelings about their readiness to see certain kinds of content on YouTube. Those settings are Explore, Explore More, or Most of YouTube. Most of YouTube takes you all the way up to age 17, but just below adult content, okay? And in any case, they launched it last year, but they're still in beta. So I highly encourage, for those of you whose kids love watching YouTube, but you always worry about what video is going to come up next, this is a great way to, I think, let them use it without having to worry as much. So please check that out. I'm fairly sure most of you have children using YouTube. Anybody have kids using TikTok? Please tell us in the chat. And this question typically goes the same way every time. Tell us in the chat, are your children using TikTok? And I know I think we skewed a little bit older, but so yes, okay. We have a couple yeses. We have a no. We have a yes, no, yes. Okay. No. Okay. I'm gonna guess it might be fairly balanced for this group tonight. Typically we get a lot more no's or no way or not ever kind of responses. No matter how we feel about it, there will be a point where our children are old enough, as much as we don't want that to happen, but they will be. And at some point you will say yes. So I just want you to be aware of a setting of an ability that TikTok launched actually 2+ years ago called family pairing. And what this requires is let me just say, it's a nice way for you and your child to ease into the TikTok experience. So it does require you to download TikTok on your own device and then TikTok on the child's device, because you're then going to designate your device as the parent one. And from there, you're allowed to restrict things like how much time they're using it, or filtering content that might not be appropriate for their age, and even limit who they're able to communicate with through the app. So that is a nice way of easing yourselves into the TikTok experience before just letting them loose on it. Okay. And the same goes with Instagram. Just earlier, it was either late last year or earlier this year, they finally, after all these years, launched something called the Family Center and the ability to do what's called supervision. So you as a parent thinking about easing your child into social media for the first time would be able to monitor things like who's following them or who they're following. You could still do things like limiting time, but you could also do that through Google's app or Apple's app. You don't necessarily have to do it through Instagram, but you can't actually, it's just giving you visibility. And again, just like I said before, it's giving you real data, as someone said in the chat, for you to have important conversations with your children. Hey, I noticed that you're following this person who is actually kind of unseemly, and someone might find out that about you, which you don't really you might not want the world to know that. So as funny as you think they are, you might not actually want everybody to know you're following them. So you might want to rethink that, especially as you get older. You might be thinking about applying to college or for a job or so on. Okay. And I will say about TikTok and Instagram, they are two, and I think Snapchat just joined them. Those two apps by default, if you are if you're 16, between the ages of 13 and 16, they turn on the privacy settings to the highest level by default. They don't do that for the rest of us, for us parents, right? The more data about us that is public through the app, the better it is for them to collect and sell to advertisers, right? But for the purposes of the younger users, they decided to turn on the highest level of privacy settings for any users 16 or under, okay? And if you're under 13, it's going to kick you off because it won't allow anyone under the age of 13 to use it. We know there are many kids out there under the age of 13 using it, which means they put in a fictitious birthday. But if they did that, they're not getting that highest level of default privacy. So you got to make sure that they've got that highest level of privacy and use these supervisory tools if you can. So just this summer in August, Snapchat decided to launch their similar kinds of settings to Instagram. And, you know, I won't go through too much detail here, but basically, it might be one of the first apps, social apps, that your children will want to use. Those of you with ages 6 to 10 years old, that won't be for a little while. But I know quite a few of you have children 11 to 14 and above. So they're probably already using this. But for those of you whose children were already using Snapchat even before this moment of them launching this tool, you could still use this tool. And again, like all the others, it gives you insight and information to have those healthy conversations with them. Anybody's kids like Roblox? Anybody have kids using Roblox? Let me know in the chat. Probably one of the fastest growing apps over the last 2-3 years. Fantastic place. I want to break a few myths about Roblox. First of all, Roblox is not a game. Roblox is a community of gamers and people who develop those games. And sometimes the people who develop those games are quite young and very talented. So I think it's a great way for creativity and connection and so on. However, don't think that only 10-year-olds are on it. There are plenty of people much older than that on it. And as good as Roblox is at monitoring the community, okay, as an example, these characters, you're an avatar in it, right? You can chat with other users on there. It is free-form chat. It's not preset text. It's free-form chat. If somebody reaches out to another user and says, hey, how old are you? Or hey, what's your phone number? Or hey, where do you live or go to school? Those will never make it onto the chat because a mix of AI and community moderation throughout the Roblox team is stopping that kind of interaction from taking place. But it doesn't stop things like speaking in code. They probably couldn't catch all of that. And so it's not a perfect system, which is why you as parents should be very aware if you're not. This is going to play a short video from Roblox showing you all the ways that you can set privacy settings within it. For some reason, I'm not able to play that. Oh, there we go. How you can set the privacy settings, turn on two-step verification, limit who can message them within the whole app or within a game, and so on. So all it takes is for you to set a code choose those settings, and then off you go. And in order to change those settings, you would need to go back and type that code. So unless the same is true of the Apple screen time, it requires a code in order for anyone to change the settings, okay? Discord, I'm not going to go into too much. Anyone here of Discord? Yeah. So Discord just became popular over the last couple of years. It's actually been very popular among older gamers for a very long time, but during the last 2 years, it's really risen in popularity with the younger kids. And it allows a lot of cool social connection. I think of it as like a super chat app. But you could join communities of people that like Harry Potter or this game or whatever, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and so on. The problem is that just like any social network, there are people you know and there are people that you don't. And Discord only recently started to really ramp up its level of safety and community moderation. They're trying very hard, but they're not at the level of the Instagrams and the TikToks and the YouTubes, because those people have been doing it for a long, long time. So be mindful of that. And we're just showing you some screenshots of some of the new settings that they were enabling over the last year or so. And same with gaming. Both Xbox, anybody's kids who's using gaming consoles. Be mindful of the ways that you can help limit their time on the games, and also the kinds of games they're allowed to use it, and even who they might be playing with. So Xbox did a great job with this app, so you could actually do this right from your phone rather than having to go to the actual Xbox and limit some of those settings. And finally, we're a technology company at Trend. We're a security software company, but the work that I do and my team has done is more around educating communities. So what we decided to do was bring some of our engineering prowess to this program, and we developed a tool for free forever called Trend Micro Family, which is also designed to do a lot of what we discussed. And even what we're trying to do is make it easier for you so that you don't have to go to every single app. You just have to go to the one and do it from here. So we'd love your feedback. Give it a try. We're just trying to make it better, as good as we can. So I don't know if there's any, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of questions right now in the Q&A, so I'm going to keep going. But if you do have questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section in English or in Spanish. The only thing I'll say about setting the rules is this. There's a lot of, I'd love to know from you in the chat, what rules work for you and your family. I think good rules do keep in mind what, when, how long, where, and with whom. And one last thing, which are, what are the consequences if you don't stick to those rules? So when we say what, we mean what are you allowed to use based on your age or the appropriateness or whatever you need it for. That's you to decide as a parent. Your child might come to you and say, hey, I really want to download this game, and you're not sure. We are big fans of Common Sense Media, and that is a resource you can use to help you decide, is this an app that is age appropriate? And even if it is, what exactly does it do that I need to be aware of? When and how long, we'll talk about in a minute, about how to think about screen time. Where, are they allowed to use it in their rooms at night or no? No phones in the rooms, right? Do they charge their phones outside of the room, which is, we highly recommend doing that in a common area where the whole family charges their devices at night, and with whom are they allowed to use it? So when you decide rules, let's say this holiday season, they get a new device That's a perfect time to have a conversation about rules. And you can start by saying, here are some of the rules, but we really encourage having the conversation and letting your child think about those rules with you, and even think about, what do you think the consequence should be then if you break that rule? Because they're more apt to stick to those rules they help to set. And let's see. With regard to screen time, I mentioned the digital wellness lab before, which is really a lot of pediatricians who research kids and screen time. And one of the things I really like about how they think about screen time is, talk to them about the fact there's only 24 hours in a day. And this is applicable for older kids and younger kids. And in each day, we have to think about, how much time do we spend doing things that support our physical health? How many hours of sleep, to going for walks, playing a sport, doing something that's physically good for us? And on top of that, how much time do we spend supporting ourselves as a learner? So hours in school or doing homework, working on even just reading, or practicing a hobby like an instrument or some other thing that they like to do that really helps to expand their minds. And then on top of that, how many hours in a day are they spending to support the relationships that are important in their lives? And when you add all of those hours up, how much time is left? Some of that time could absolutely be used for screens, for fun, right? Remember, some of this time in pink, blue, and green might actually involve screens, and that's okay if they are supporting these healthy categories. So you as parents don't need to feel guilty. Honestly, if your children are doing a lot of the other things in pink, blue, and green, those are healthy things. That is okay. And if that means that leftover time can be used for screens for fun, that's okay, because they're not doing it at the expense of the other things in the columns. However, if that time left over is 4, 5, 6 hours, that does not mean they should be on screen that entire time. And that's why you, using the tools we talked about and the rules that you set with them, come in handy. So other things they can do, some parents have shared with us, I create an activity box with little slips of paper of things they can do with their free time, and they pull out of it. And okay, this one says play a board game. This one says go ride my bike. This one says, draw something, and so on. So all kinds of options. We challenge you as parents to actually do this to yourselves. Ask yourself, how many hours are you spending on each of these things? And see what is reflected back at you and the example you might be setting. Which brings us to setting a good example. Do you have rules for yourself? Do you have any rules about technology and your own use of it? Let us know in the chat. And what kind of example do you set? If your child were to draw that chart and add the hours they think that you spend on physical health, as a learner, supporting relationships in your life, what would they report back to you about the example you set? In the interest of time, I'm going to start moving pretty quickly through these sections, but again, I'm happy to answer questions as they come up. And I will do that in a minute as they come in. So one thing I want to say about privacy is that you should definitely use the privacy settings, right? I think that goes without saying. Here I'm showing you screenshots of one of the most famous and favorite games called, well, actually, does anyone, oh yeah, the name of it's there, Fortnite. I was going to see if you knew what this was, but mostly they're not set to where you want them to. So anytime your kid gets a new device or game, it's a great time to say, hey, let's see how fast you can find the privacy settings. Let's see what you find. And let's talk about which ones you set. This is an important habit to start at a young age so that it's ingrained in them as they get older. And as I said before, they're never going to be set to the highest level that you want. So it's always important to check that. There is a way in Facebook, by the way, to see what the public might find about you and your Facebook page. And people have been really horrified by how much is being shared publicly, that they didn't realize their Facebook page was sharing publicly about them. So for those of you who are Facebook users, I highly recommend trying that out, because you may find that what you thought was private isn't actually private. And do this on a regular basis, because they're always changing their settings. The other thing about privacy settings is that when we download a new app or device or whatever, we usually don't want to spend the time reading all the legal mumbo jumbo that comes scrolling past us. We just go right to the bottom and we hit I agree or I accept. But what we skipped over was usually a clause that exists in any app or game or site that's free for us to use. And it doesn't say it in these words, but this is actually what it means, that you own everything you post or do or whatever it is you're doing with this app. That's yours, right? But we, as the company who created it, have the right to use that information whenever, wherever, forever. This is one of the things that we agree to when we skip over all that language and hit I accept. And so I think an important thing about privacy settings is, yes, they're good to help protect us from the people we don't know out there, right? But they do nothing to protect our privacy from the company whose app, game, or site or device we're using. And that is why you should always assume that everything I'm doing online is part of my public life, right? Because even that company who's tracking all of that, they might be keeping it close, but who knows? A hacker could get that information and make it public. They themselves might accidentally make it public. So, we remind our kids that really, once you're on the internet, welcome to your public life. And with regard to cyber criminals, they're not targeting our kids. I said earlier, it's important to have security software because they could be fooled by what they think is a real search result on Google or Bing, wherever they're doing a search. And in fact, that link is going to some malicious website. It looks legitimate, but it's actually riddled with malicious software. And we're downloading all this, spyware, viruses, and we didn't even know it. Or, ads that look too good to be true, or, social media posts that seem, whoa, is that real? So cyber criminals are always trying to lay their traps everywhere. They're not necessarily targeting our kids, but because they go where all the people are, your children could end up becoming victim of one of these cyber criminal acts. And that's why using security software on devices that your kids use is so important, and you too. Kimberly, if you could help, we're going to launch our last poll. Do your kids own their own cell phone? A, yes. B, no. C, thinking about it. A, yes. B, no. C, thinking about it. It's a tough one. Oh, by the way, I believe the average age of a child getting their own phone now is 10 years old. It might have been 10 for some time now, but it's definitely 10. Yeah. And for those of you who said no until your 8th grade or high school, that is okay. I know there are some of you out there. That is okay. And some of you who said, you know what, they're walking by their own, on their own, home from school now. In middle school, I really need to be able to reach them. And that is okay too. Whatever your reasons are, there's no right or wrong answer. So let's end the poll here. Yes, and share those results. So it looks like the majority of you have said no, and that makes sense based on the ages of your kids, no, or thinking about it, right? And so this does make sense. So I think even if you said yes, I do want to remind you of an important conversation to have with your kids when you finally do say yes, because in addition to everything we just talked about, there is something about the phone that it's the most attractive thing to children, and that is the camera. The camera that allows us to take the selfies or, do those crazy filters on our faces or make the video that we want to post to TikTok, or do FaceTime or group Instagram video chat with friends. And that's great. And that's good ways of using the camera. But we do want to remind you as parents that there has been an increase of children creating images and videos that are they probably don't want the whole world to see. And it's not that there are strangers out there trying to encourage this. In fact, many times it's peers. Someone who supposedly has an interest in them saying, send me a pic, send me a pic. If you like me, send me a pic. And the problem is that it's never just to the one person. It's a great risk that you take by taking the photo, certainly sending it to the one person. So please remind your children that if they ever get pressure to take one of those and send it to someone, that they should never feel that pressure. They need you as their parents to keep the door open, to come to them if they're troubled by this without judgment on your part. We really don't want this to happen to our children, and it's important to have that conversation up front. The trend is the reason I'm raising it to you, because the trend went higher over the period of the pandemic. And so we're still seeing it at levels that I don't think are that warrant our attention, and important for you to have that conversation with your kids. So that's number one. Number two, I want to share a question that was asked of me many years ago by a father who said, my kid is a really good kid. A lot of people like him, but I'm a little bit worried what if someone sends him one of those? He didn't ask for it. They just send it to him because they like him or something. What do I do? The phone bill's in my name as his father. So our advice is this, okay? First is tell your child if they ever get an image like that or any kind of image that's disturbing to them, again, with open door and without judgment, make sure they know they can come to you to tell you about it. The worst thing they could do is have it and never tell you about it. Because if there's an investigation, they're going to know that this image went from this device to that device and you did nothing about it and it was under your phone bill name. So make sure they come to you and tell you about it and then delete it. Do not forward it on to anybody. But I will also advise you as parents to do your part by taking some kind of action. Either if you know the parent of the child who sent it to yours and you feel comfortable, maybe you can have that conversation. But many times it's not a comfortable conversation. Report it to the school if it's someone in their school, but you don't really know the parents very well. Or I suppose you could report it to law enforcement, although we have worked with school resource officers and they've said, oh, yes, you can tell us, but we're not really going to punish two young people in the way we would if it was someone older who was asking for it, and so on. But I just urge you to take an action rather than no action, because again, if there's an investigation, they're going to know it went to your phone under your phone bill name, and at least you took some kind of action about it. Okay? Does anyone have a child who struggles to stop playing the game when you say time's up? Just let me know in the chat. Anybody have a kid like that? Yeah, I see Kelly raising her hand. I see you. Yes, all of them. Yes, all of them. Great answer, Meg. I think that is, yeah. So a couple of things. We talked about some of those tools already that you could use the Xbox Family Settings app. You could use any number of the things that we talked about for limiting time. I'm a big fan of games that are timed. I think the world of Minecraft, I think it can encourage a lot of creativity and collaboration, but it can go on and on and on. And I think a good practice obviously is, hey, 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes, and so on. But you still may have that kid that says, but I'm almost done with this level. Can I just have 5 more minutes, right? And then before you know it, 5 turns into 10 and it's the whole conversation was lost. So games like Rocket League or any of those sporting games they all end eventually. And Fortnite Battle Royale is a great one too, because last person standing and the game is over, right? Although those could go on for very long as well. But so those are just some things to think about. And because most games are very social, I would be very mindful of the age ratings for the games. Your gaming devices, consoles have an ability to block the kinds of games by age that can be allowed to be played on it. So if you're not familiar with that setting and they try to play a game that's like too violent for their age, it won't play if you set that setting on the console. Unkindness, I know some of you had talked about dealing with bullying and unkindness. Unfortunately, it's just a fact of our world today. Unfortunately, the adults in our children's lives are not setting the greatest examples of civility and respect in online spaces. But we can do some things to shore up our children in the name of resilience. I think that telling kids, okay, you got to be nice to other people, that's great. Of course we do. And for all the reasons we talked about before, it's your public life. Everything about you is being tracked. Everything about us, every time we search, watch, click, download, every single thing we're doing. Believe me, Google knows way more about you than you think that you might like, actually. And that is true of our children as well. So, but kindness is not just about saying nice things, right? Kindness also comes in many other forms. So I know for a fact that in middle school is the most awkward time. It's the moment where half the kids are now getting a phone and the other half don't have one yet. Or some are allowed to use Snapchat and others are not allowed to yet. There's a really awkward time here. And sometimes respect is in the form of saying, you know what, we're starting a chat. The kids love to create the group text. And the first time they get that phone, they go crazy, right? I saw it myself. And then eventually it dies down. But boy, do they love to do that for the first month or so. And they don't realize they're starting to exclude those who don't have a phone. So we as parents can show and encourage kindness by saying, hey, seems like you're all making some plans to get together, but so-and-so doesn't have a phone. Can you please call them or talk to them at school? Don't forget to include those who don't have the same communication vehicles as you. Another is around taking pictures and starting to post them online. We have to be mindful of the fact that maybe not everybody wants that photo up. Some people feel stronger levels of privacy than others. So a good habit to say is, hey, I'm going to put this up online. Are you okay with this? Encourage your children to do that, especially with their close friends. And they should hear you say that too, to others in your lives. So that is an example that they realize that should be a norm. Have you ever had someone post a picture with you in it on Facebook and you did not know until later? Has that ever happened to you? Sometimes it's kind of an uncomfortable conversation to ask the person to take it down, especially if it's something you didn't want everybody seeing or knowing, right? So those are other forms of respect. And sometimes the rules, even if your child's friend has their own device and they have their own, you might have different rules. I'm not allowed to play that first person shooter game. I'm not allowed to have Snapchat yet. So then don't be mindful of that. Respect the fact that that family made different choices than yours, and don't make fun of them for it. Respect that there are differences among families and their relationship to technology. And we also need to remind our kids, especially as they start using social media, remind them that their value is not equal to the number of likes, followers, comments, anything that they're getting on the internet. It is so easy. It makes us feel really good when we post something and people like it, right? You get that hit, and for children, it's an even stronger feeling. So some feel very reinforced by more and more likes and more followers. But we have to break that train, and we have to remind them that that's not a measure of their value to anyone. They are so much more than that. Because it can feel really devastating to some kids when they see everybody else getting all these likes and they're not getting any, or they're not getting any friend requests and so on. That a few good friends is better than a whole bunch of strangers. And I think as parents, the other thing we can do, hopefully it never happens, but to be prepared. Ask yourself 2 questions. What would I do if my child was ever bullied online? Hopefully that has not happened to any of you. And we are, if it has, we are big proponents of the Cyberbullying Research Center that has fantastic resources for you as parents. But certainly work with your school if it happened within the school context, with other support groups that might be around you. We do know that children who have, first of all, we know that children are more likely to witness unkindness online rather than be victim of it, but certainly there are some that will be. And a good way to build resilience is to help your children think, whoever that person is, usually those who hurt, maybe that person is going through something and it's not really about you, right? Maybe they're hurting in some way and just lashing out. That's one way to sort of change their mentality and build muscles of resilience when something knocks them down. The second thing we know that helps build resilience is that children who have a support network usually can bounce back better than those who don't. So supportive friends, of course, you as parents, many children will name a teacher in the school they go to as that teacher that has their back. Very nice to hear that. We hear that over and over again among kids, that there's always that one teacher they feel they can trust and go to. So ask your child if there is that one teacher in school that exists for them. And finally, if you see people doing good things online, if you've seen those feel-good stories, please share those with your children so they know that not everything on the internet is doom and gloom. I'm going to close it out here with our last section on being savvy. So I'll go very quickly here, and there's some really fun habits here that I hope that you'll practice and teach your children to practice as well. One of the things we know is it's getting increasingly more difficult to distinguish what you can and can't trust online, what is real and what is not. Someone could take your image and create an account, pretend to be you. So a reverse image search is something we recommend. If you don't know, is this person in this photo really the person for this account, or are they somebody else? So you can take a photo, do a reverse image search, and see if that image has actually appeared elsewhere on the internet. Because if it has in a different context, then you're going to know it's not really that person. And that's actually a picture from some magazine or something they're pretending to be, right? The other thing is we've actually worked with the National Association for Media Literacy Education, but the librarians in your children's schools are the biggest proponents of media literacy education, helping our children to determine and discern what sources of information are the most credible and trustworthy online. But one other thing you can do as a parent is just develop the pause button in your children. Any kind of post that creates a strong emotional reaction when you see it, a headline or a video or an image, is a red flag to say, wait a minute. I need to ask some questions here. And while I won't enumerate all of these now, we developed this parent's guide to media to healthy media relationships with the National Association for Media Literacy Education. And we encourage you to read through these scenarios that your kid might actually come home saying some of these things, and you'll have a way to kind of guide the conversation to make them think, maybe that's not real. Maybe I need to ask some questions here and validate whether that's a hoax or something else that I should not be trusting. How many of you, tell me in the chat, have ever looked your own name up on the internet? Anybody ever look yourself up, your own name? And what did you find? Just put it in the chat. Have you ever looked up your own name on the internet? And what did you find? Okay, if you have never done it, I highly recommend you do it. And the reason is you may find two things. You may find them both. The first is a cyber twin, somebody who has exactly your name, but is not you. And you want to know if they exist because maybe they've done good things and that's okay, but it's not you, right? But maybe they haven't done good things. Maybe there's somebody with your name that's got public things about them that are not so flattering. This is something you want to know as well. Your children will want to know this as well as they think about future jobs or college or anything in the future where someone might be searching a little bit more about them. The second thing you might find is actually you, but things that are public you didn't realize were public. So this is one of those good habits we like to encourage you to do, and you don't have to go looking every day. You can just go to google.com/alerts, type in a name or even a word, whatever it is you want to be alerted on. And you can decide if you want to be alerted. You need a Google account, okay? But you would receive an email daily, weekly, monthly. Anytime something public gets posted with that name in it. We find this to be a very important good habit for not just our children, but frankly for us too, because we might have a cyber twin that we did not know about. Why do we say this? Because of this number. We've been following the Kaplan Institute for the last 8 years now. They've been doing a study asking college admissions officers across the country every year a lot of questions, but one of the ones that they added in 2014 was, beyond the application, do you look up this student on the internet? And the first year they asked it was 25%, and every year it just kept going up. So the most recent was 66%. We'll probably look you up if they think they need to know a little bit more about you. And in this most recent year, of the people who did look, 57% found something that was not so flattering. It made them rethink that they should not probably admit the student into their community. But 38% found something that did convince them, yes, this is the student we want. And that is why we need to balance all of the conversation we had today. A lot of what we talked about today, if you did all of that, we would look up your child's name and probably find nothing, right? You'd be hidden because if you're using privacy settings, that won't show up on a Google search. Anything behind privacy settings is not publicly indexable. So that's good. You're using privacy settings. I don't find anything like, but that also means you're invisible and you're not demonstrating to me that you've learned how to master this important tool called the internet. So how can we start to encourage those good uses that might actually be beneficial beyond the actual use itself, but also for their future prospects in jobs, in college, or whatever? So things are, learning new skills on places like Khan Academy or even on YouTube. You could use the internet to promote a cause that you care about or raise funds for that organization that needs your help. There are ways to showcase accomplishments if you're an aspiring athlete, like an app like Huddle, or a writer. You can start a blog. If you're young still, you can hide it behind privacy settings, and when you're older, open it up for more to see. You can have a private YouTube channel if your kid likes making videos. We're really big fans of contests because contests are a way to also teach how to stick to a deadline, how to understand and stick to rules, how to have your work evaluated by someone else. And you know what? Maybe they never win. Maybe all they're doing is building a portfolio of contest entries, whether they're an artist, a graphic artist or a writer, photographer, performer, whatever it is. Or they might win, who knows? But what a great way to encourage positive uses of the internet. So with that, and I apologize that we're running a little overtime here, but I hope you found this helpful because I want you to know, we've developed a curriculum for younger kids to talk a lot about what we talked about tonight, and you could actually do these with your children starting tomorrow. It's called our Kids Cyber Academy, and each of these modules comes with a short video, animated video, a Kahoot quiz, and then an activity sheet if you choose to print that out, and a conversation guide for you to use with your kids. And we also have made them available in multiple languages. So I know some of you tonight are listening in Espanol, but also all of these other languages if families at your school might need this support. We're adding other languages to this in the coming months, including Ukrainian and Japanese, I think. So please share that with your children or your children's school. We'd love to see more of you using those tools. And our resources can be found on tremmicro.com/internet-safety, as well as our partner PTO Today, which can be found at their teacherlist.com/blog/parent-corner-tech-talk. So with that, I encourage you to stay active. Just attending tonight is not really enough. The technology is changing constantly. We host multiple of these events throughout the year, and we'll do it the year after that and the year after that. And we do update our content constantly. So if you think this was useful, we certainly would welcome you back a year from now because something would have changed by then. And we challenge you to do one new thing that you had not done before tonight. Maybe you look yourself up on the internet. Maybe you finally change that password on your router. Maybe it's to have the conversation about screen time with your children. But do one new thing. And as I said before, my colleagues will post in the chat here, but you'll also see it when you close out of Zoom, a feedback form. It's really short. All we want is any kind of feedback you want to give us, good, bad, or ugly, room for improvement, other topics you'd like us to cover in the future. And if you do choose to include your email address, either in the sign-in sheet or in the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win one of 5 copies of our one of our flagship products, which will protect up to 5 devices in your home, including cell phones, by the way, for a year. So, oops, that's an old slide. So thank you so much again, everyone, for joining me tonight. My name is Lynette Owens, and I hope that you found it helpful. I think there were a couple of questions, maybe it looks like they were answered in the chat already. So if you have additional questions, feel free to add them to the chat. I'm sorry, to the Q&A. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with me tonight. And we'd love to hear from you, like I said, through the feedback channel. And if you so wish, and there were people in your community that didn't get to attend this evening, please tell them about additional dates. Kimberly, if you could put the link in the chat that lists all of the many dates where we're still doing this session throughout next June, I think. I think it goes all the way to next June. So we'd love to have anybody in your communities attend as well. We provide Spanish for all of our sessions, and we add additional languages as they are requested of us. Okay, I think with that, thank you so much. And I want to thank Gigi, our interpreter, our Spanish interpreter, who actually joined us from Munich, I think. Is that right, Gigi? Chat. I think she's in Germany, and it's very, very, very late where she is, but she's in Berlin, sorry, in Berlin. It's still very, very late in Berlin too. Thank you, everyone, and good night.